Good morning. Thank you all for being here today, and we're going to call this meeting to order. And let's see, I believe we're going to ask Representative Joseph Gullett to open us with a word of prayer.
Bow your heads. Father God, thank you for this day. Thank you for allowing us to get here safely. Let us deliberate with good minds and clean minds for the state of Georgia and for our constituents. Bless your name and all you do. Amen.
Thank you so much for those kind, wonderful words. So this morning we're here to talk about community solar. And this is our second meeting. We had another meeting at Kennesaw State, and our many thanks to them for their graciousness and for all they did to set up for that meeting. It was very well attended, and I think we all learned something that day. I wanted to just start out by saying we are all here as representatives to do the people's business. Everyone who serves on this particular committee and that I have the privilege of serving with in the House and Senate, I believe, are here for that reason. We should ask hard questions, and we should diligently work to discuss issues, even if they're issues that we do not fully grasp every concept of. It's important for all of us as individuals to come together collectively and ask questions that are not popular sometimes. We all possess a blueprint or an approach that we habitually reference when we assess new challenges. Often our blueprint becomes outdated, and yet we as humans hold to that. We're going to ask questions that might make people uncomfortable. The highest performing organizations ask and respond openly to questions without becoming defensive. Healthy cultures constructively encourage dissenting views. We must practice asking and discussing courageous questions and recognize it is essential to do the work of the people in the state of Georgia. We were all sent here, everyone sitting on this panel, to represent the good citizens of our district and the state of Georgia. And that's what we're here today to do. So with that glorious beginning, I'm going to call Steve Butler up let's start this meeting. He is with Georgia Solar Industries Association.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I want to thank the entire committee for their time and attention. Obviously, 2 meetings in the off season is a lot of your time, and we're grateful for that. And also Chairman Parsons for creating this committee. We appreciate you, sir, and all that you do for our state. First of all, in your packet, you're going to find answers to the questions that you asked last committee. There was a lot of good questions asked by committee members. It's somewhat condensed because there were some repetitive questions. But we wanted to make sure that you felt heard and that we provided you with the answers that are necessary. Please look at that at your convenience. And also there's a list of the states that were asked where community solar is currently operating. We provided that with a little overview of each state, so you can also take a look at that at your leisure. And I'm just going to outline what you're going to hear today. In conversations with committee members after the last hearing, there were 4 distinct categories in which they wanted to hear responses from the industry. Today, you'll hear from Bob Scheer, who will go over utility economics and how community solar impacts them. You're also going to hear from Carl Rabago, a former Texas PSC commissioner, and he'll dive into the supposed cost shift and how community solar impacts non-subscribers. You'll also hear from Brandon Smithwood, who will go over the developer economics, and James Feinstein, who will go over the customer experience and subscriber economics. Those were the 4 basic categories in which most of the questions and concerns of the committee fall. And we also want to go into more detail. The devil's always in the details, and we're happy to get into that today. Finally, Jonathan Roberts will discuss some of the engineering aspects. I know Representative Thomas had some of the more pointed questions about that, and we're happy to answer them. Want to make him available for that as well. We greatly appreciate the input of the committee members. I thought the feedback after the last hearing was fantastic as far as everybody was really detailed in what they wanted to hear, and we seek to answer those questions today. I also want to take a moment to say there's going to be a lot of good and bad you're going to hear today. Obviously, some folks are not happy with this concept. I would ask the committee to make everybody prove what they have to say. It's one thing to throw something good or bad out into the ether, if you will. It's another thing to prove it and to demonstrate whether what you're saying is accurate or not. So thank you to the committee members. Thank you, Chair Camp. Thank you, Chairman Parsons. And without further ado, I will get out of the way. Thank you, Madam Chair. Is there any questions before
I don't see any questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Butler.
Thank you.
All right, so just come on up. All right. While they're coming up, I just wanted to thank our committee members. We have Representative Rahman. Thank you for being here today. We have Representative Gullett, Representative Ward Lewis, Representative Ridley, Representative Drenner, Representative Werkheiser. Of course, we have Chairman Don Parsons, who is the Chair of Energy Utilities and Telecommunications. And I'd like to echo, I appreciate his trust in this committee and allowing us to be here today to discuss this important issue. And Representative Brad Thomas is joining us via Zoom. So any questions that Representative Thomas asked before, I promise he is listening. So Bob, go ahead.
Good morning, y'all. Thank you, Chair Camp, Chairman Parsons, and committee members for the opportunity to speak again about community solar. Me and Mr. Rabago will be speaking to y'all today about where the bill savings of community solar comes from and why we are confident that a market-based community solar program under the regulation of the Public Service Commission would be a benefit to Georgia. As a reminder, in other states with community solar programs, subscribers get an energy or a dollar credit that either directly offsets their energy usage or reduces their monthly bill directly. The customer pays a subscription fee to the owner or operator of the project, and that fee is priced below the value of the credit. In this way, the community solar developer attracts the necessary cash to allow them to develop and build projects, which some speakers will speak to you about later today. The customer supports renewable energy while seeing a bill reduction, and the utility and everybody else on the grid sees benefits from new distributed solar. I want to address an argument that we've been hearing from utilities opposing community solar. And this is an argument that we hear all across the country, actually, that in order to give the bill credit or savings to the subscriber, that money has to come from another person, a non-subscriber to the program. It's referred to as cost shift. In Georgia, there's no data backing up this argument. And really, it's simple. The utilities oppose customer-driven, third-party owned projects like community solar because they threaten to supplant utility investments and to take away from shareholder profits. And because utility rate making often happens in a black box, it's hard for legislators and for me, frankly, to argue against it. So my testimony today will focus on two topics: monopoly rate making and the value that community solar brings to the grid, or where the bill credits come from. So about rate making, or the art of how the Public Service Commission sets policy, sets the rates that Georgia Power charges its captured customers. One of the principles of rate making is that those who cause the costs should pay for them. And you'll remember in the last session that we heard community solar was absolutely a cost shift. And we agree if you define cost shift to mean people will save money on their bills. If you mean cost shift to say that non-subscribers will pay more because of community solar programs, well, then that hasn't been shown, and we strongly disagree with that statement. So what Georgia Power was really arguing then was that when they lose revenue and profit, when people save on their bills. But lost revenue is not the same thing as increasing the cost for other people, increasing the cost to serve non-subscribers. It's not the same thing as somebody's bill getting lowered. And if the new community solar project adds benefit to the grid, then it could actually decrease costs. I want to point out that this lost revenue argument, Georgia Power is not entitled to that revenue. If somebody buys an energy efficient fridge and uses less power that year, Georgia Power doesn't get to add a charge to their bill to recover the money that they thought they were going to recover from that person at the beginning of the year. And second, and importantly for rate making, deciding who pays what aspects of the grid and how much, it's not an exact science. Everybody uses the grid differently, but we all don't have an individual rate that accounts for our specific use of the grid and of the energy system. And third, it's premature to claim that there will be a cost shift because there's no credit amount has been set. The bill that was introduced last year gave oversight of that determination to the Georgia Public Service Commission. There were guardrails on that, but there was discretion in there to address any of these kind of costs and concerns that you've heard raised. And in our view, the only way that a cost shift could happen here is if Georgia Power fails to capture the benefits of community solar programs. I also want to talk briefly a little bit more about that, about why we don't expect to see a cost shift. And that's because the grid gets a benefit from distributed generation solar, like community solar. And even Georgia Power admits this in its filings at the Public Service Commission, though we probably don't agree on how big that benefit is. If you'll look at this handout that's in your packet that says community solar benefits outweigh the costs, it's blue, white. In that blue box in the top left corner, Georgia Power said in the 2022 IRP that the total benefit provided by distributed generation solar, like community solar, that's the same size project, exceeds the total cost caused by community solar. Now, they call it a trade secret how much that benefit is. If you look at the table below, I want to pause on that for a second because it's a great example of how the utility is overly focusing on the costs and downplays the benefits. That table was redacted by Georgia Power in its public filings at the commission. Every single one of those redacted numbers is a benefit of distributed generation. The only number that's not redacted is the cost. And again, this is from a paper that determined that the distributed solar was a net benefit. And we think it speaks to the selective data that Georgia Power releases for review and that we have to work with at this time. And those categories or components, which are a little easier to read on the right-hand side, those come from Georgia Power's renewable cost benefit framework. And though I won't go through the whole list right now, I'm happy to talk about it later. These are kind of the benefits and how Georgia Power should be capturing and accounting for some of the things we've heard them complain about, that they have to build more generation to back up the system. That's all accounted for, and they can account for it. And I also want to point out that this list is not exhaustive. It doesn't include things like the health benefits of reduced emissions, or the jobs or the investments from private companies and community solar projects. The Coalition for Community Solar Access recently conducted a study of 6 economic impact studies. These were conducted by universities or research institutions in 6 different states. And they found that community solar programs create an average of 16 jobs and $2 million in GDP per megawatt. That means, for example, if Georgia were to set up a 1 gigawatt program, you could expect to see 16,000 jobs and $2 billion in GDP. And these economic benefits, while they're not in this table, are absolutely something that this committee should consider. And I'll turn it over to Carl now, but all that's to say that the bill credit comes from these values, these benefits. It doesn't come from Georgia Power. It doesn't come from your neighbor. The community solar model works, and it works around the country because community solar adds significant value to the whole grid. And the subscribers who fund that project should see the benefits. Thank you.
Mr. Shearer, may I ask, the study that you mentioned, the impact study, is there any way that you could send a copy to either Bailey or Dendrick so they can distribute it to our committee?
I can.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Come on, there we go. All right, so let's see.
Yes, please go.
Okay.
Feel free. Go ahead. This is
No, I have
this is
to do-
Carl Robigo. And if you'd like to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yep, I sure will. as soon as I can, give me 1 second because I can't
Sure.
seem to make this mouse move. Oh, there it is. No. Yep. All right. Good. All right. It's up. And so I could just use this as a background. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I am honored to be here with you. My name is Carl Robigo. I am a independent consultant working out of my home in Denver, Colorado. And I appreciate the warmer weather. Thank you very much. Our rain tends to fall as snow this time of year. I've spent about 34 years in the electric utility business since I got out of the Army. And I have had the great honor of doing it in a wide variety of jobs and circumstances. I got to be a public utility commissioner for the state of Texas at the age of 34. Shortly after that, I was a deputy assistant secretary for the U.S. Department of Energy, responsible for the nation's renewable energy technology development programs in what was called then the Office of Utility Technologies. I have been a utility executive with the AES Corporation, as well as with Austin Energy. I have worked for advocacy groups like the Rocky Mountain Institute Environmental Defense Fund, and I've even spent some time working with a company that made plastic out of corn. Let's talk about agricultural opportunities in another setting, but that is now actually pivoted with some of the same people. We're working on a business that makes jet fuel out of corn, along with a fascinating blockchain business to verify carbon reductions. So I'm a nerd about regulatory things. I'm a nerd about competitive free enterprise opportunities to bring environmental benefits and market growth to traditionally, let's call them rather closed market opportunities. Most of my career has been spent advocating for and advancing distributed renewable energy and other energy resources. So I come with the bias that is substantiated with some pretty extensive analysis, books we've published about how right-sized and right-sided electric resources have value that far exceeds their cost. And therefore, if taken advantage of by incumbent electric utilities, can reduce the cost of electric service for all. That's the value proposition. It's been demonstrated. It has been documented. And it is an opportunity that exists before you with this community solar legislation. So with that, let me launch into this a little bit and take you through some of the background ideas I wanted to give you at a high level. I'm providing some slides. I also provided a narrative version of my comments, which you can peruse at your leisure. So the first thing to start with is the concept that, and Bob introduced this, he said this is a market-based idea, but there's a bit of confusion that already exists out there, which is that market-based means the same as deregulated, and nothing can be further from the truth. The job of your Public Service Commission, which they have performed amiably well over the 11 years that I've been participating in various Georgia PSC proceedings, is to act as a substitute for competition. Their job is to discipline the requests for increased spending and the cost effectiveness proposals that the utilities bring to them. Nothing that I've seen in this proposed legislation would create deregulation or requires deregulation in order for it to succeed. This is about using market-based approaches to achieve lower cost energy resources. Again, the value proposition for basically distributed generation in general. Now, let me see if I can do this. Good. So let me dig right in. I'm going to talk about 3 subject matter issues at the very start. The first one is rate impacts. And I'm a lawyer, and I'm an electricity nerd, so I'm very careful about the words I choose. You'll get the word or the phrase cost shifts thrown at you a lot. And it has been popularized by people who want to oppose non-utility distributed generation as an argument that suggests something bad is going to happen to someone. Cost shifts, you're supposed to, say it and then spit or something like that. And it's not really been explained or discussed in an honest and straightforward manner. I'm not sure I can change the popular conception of cost shifts, but what I can do is ask you to focus on what we in the benefit cost assessment community we feel more objectively focus on, which is rate impacts. The question is, will this action, this program, this opportunity, this competitive market offering have rate impacts? And are those rate impacts beneficial or adverse, and to who? And do they accomplish our policy goals that you as a legislature will set out? The most fundamental, basic first thing you have to keep track of when you think about this is the Reagan phrase, trust but verify. Because a lot of people throw a lot of numbers and they don't back it up. They don't verify how they got them. It is possible that you will see potential cost shifts anytime a utility overspends and ignores trends that are happening. For example, if your electric utility had ignored the LED light bulb, they would have a system that is way too big and way too expensive for the level of electricity consumption that is going on in homes and businesses today. Likewise, if they ignore the popular demand for direct access to competitive renewable energy through programs like community solar, then they will overbuild their system and overspend. That creates only the potential for a cost shift. However, it doesn't automatically change anything because, as I point out here, utilities can't change rates without the PSC looking at things. And the PSC looks at everything. If you've ever been inside a general rate case, they are insanely complex. There are spreadsheets after spreadsheets after spreadsheets. The PSC gets to see all the costs. And in the course of any individual rate case, which is the only way you can change rates, there are things that go up and things that go down, and the PSC works out all of that. One thing that is also true about those processes is it is the utility, because they exercise the monopoly, that has the obligation of proving everything they say. So they don't get to say cost shift and raise anybody's rates. They have to go to the Public Service Commission. They have to say, hey, I've got a big problem here with my earnings. I can't pay for the system that I've built, and I need help adjusting my rates. And until they do that, all we've got is talking points. The good thing is we got a PSC that's going to do that work. The one thing, and I don't want to get off into the whole world of where all the cost shifts are, because it's not relevant to the specific legislation, but it is important to remember that we set prices, we use prices, which are rates in the electricity space, in order to get people to do things. We give discounts to big businesses that they'll come to our state and bring some jobs and some investment, and everybody else gets to pay for those. We'll give you a discount if you reduce your peak consumption under a demand response program. We'll give you some money if you install some insulation, or maybe put in some of those LED light bulbs in the old days when they weren't just commonplace. We do things like that with our prices and our rates to try to encourage efficient use of the product that utilities make and deliver for us. And that's critical because that's how we advance economic efficiency. We don't live in yesterday. With rates and costs, we live looking at what we want the world to look like tomorrow. And if that includes more market-based renewable energy, that's what this bill is about. And you can send those price signals and get that behavior to happen. Last thing, and use it as a transition to the next slide, is that we can sort out all these complicated countervailing questions with benefit cost assessment. Let me flip to that and start talking about this. after first making clear, actually, I'm going to go out of order on my slides. I'm going to go here first, and then I'll come back to make sure we get the dollar flows. In community solar, the way it works is that a customer invests personal capital in making a solar plant happen in their state, in their community, if you will, and then gets a credit, a payback, a return on their investment from the utility. So what are they doing? They're making a power plant get constructed that is clean, renewable, and job creating. And then they expect a return on their investment, just like every Georgia Power shareholder at Southern Company expects on theirs. It is about making investments in things we want and getting a fair return from the marketplace. In this case, a marketplace dominated by Georgia Power, for helping bring those resources to the mix. We calibrate those values by comprehensively assessing them. And we do that using a process. I got to tell you, I was tickled pink. My first appearance in the IRP 11 years ago was to make the case that Georgia Power and the Public Service Commission should rely on value of solar analysis, a rigorous benefit cost assessment method that would be transparent, objective, and comprehensive. Shortly thereafter, with the ASI, Georgia Power told me in a public hearing at Public Service Commission that they liked what I did and copied it to come up with their RCB. Now, they didn't copy it all the way. There's still work that Georgia Power needs to do to improve that process, including especially the transparent and comprehensive side. Bob already made that point for you. But we break these things down into what does this resource contribute and what's it worth and what does it cost and what's that worth and do we have a net benefit? And I've included some slides here that'll help me make the point before I pivot back. First, here's a recent analysis from Virginia. And I did not, let's see, there we go. Here's a recent analysis from Virginia, which shows the value of community solar there done by some analysts at Dunsky Energy and Climate Consultants, I think they are, or Carbon Consultants. And they basically just create a simple stack of what's the value in avoided energy and capacity that comes from community solar, what's the value in avoided transmission, because remember, community solar doesn't have to, we don't ship the electrons from community solar to the customers who subscribe. Okay, that's kind of a myth. The electrons actually go from the plant to the nearest unserved load. I'm getting really nerdy here, but the electrons don't chase the subscriber. They don't have to be lifted up to the transmission system so they can be distributed down to the customer. You can't get down on your hands and knees, look in your socket if you're a community solar subscriber and see a green glow. Okay, it doesn't happen that way. What happens is that the community solar facility produces energy that is used as close as possible as the grid will allow. And where that need is made, it is met. Okay. What's important about that is community solar is the kind of solar resource that can be sited anywhere. If Georgia Power has places that are more valuable for the siting of this resource, they should raise their hand, participate in this program, share that information, and arrange for these facilities to end up or give incentives for these facilities to end up in the best possible places on the grid. And community solar can do that because the customers and the facility are separate. It's an exchange of credits. So you save transmission every time you do community solar. You can also do a much more detailed analysis. This is a meta-analysis that I just included to show you that you break it down by all the component parts like I was describing early, and various studies come up with various numbers. We've gotten really good at this now, and we've documented how to do benefit cost analysis. We could also look at the initial cost of electricity, but this is one of those things where I want to make a point about some misinformation that you may have been provided. And that is that utility scale solar is the cheapest solar, and that's what we should always go with. This is the comparison of the prices of expected energy, but only at the place where the energy is made. It ignores those transmission costs. It ignores distribution costs. It ignores line losses. It's just what they call in the business at the bus bar prices. And so if you compare this, you would say community solar looks more expensive than utility solar, but that's undelivered, untransmitted, and it doesn't tell the whole story. In this case, a difference of only a penny and a half, if you will, in transmission costs makes community solar competitive with utility scale. Okay, so let me go back and talk to you very briefly about this flows and make sure we're all square on, oops, one too many, on where the electricity goes. There we go. Okay, now I'm going to do this game. One more back. Can he? Yes. Okay. Just one thing we need to do is make sure we keep straight about who pays for what and where the money flows. Okay. And this is just a simple breakdown, but it starts with community solar customers pay their full electric bills for all the electricity, including all the fixed costs that are delivered to them. Separately and independently, they earn a credit for making a good thing happen. That's the biggest takeaway, right? They are fully charged. They don't get a discount. They don't shift any of their costs, but they do earn a credit for making a good thing happen. And getting that credit right is the job of the utility with its evidence and the PSC with its judgment. Then after they do that, and at the same time that they do that, those same community solars pay for the right to receive those benefits. And they do that by subscribing to the facility, becoming investors, again, with that expectation of return. All utility customers are called on to help pay for those credits, which is the same way you pay for anything else Georgia Power does for you. But if it's a better deal, it will improve rates. And that's the last thing I'm going to say, because I know I've gone on way too long, but I've told you I love talking about this stuff. And this is going all the way to my last slide, which is right here. This is a table of some rate and rate changes. It compares what's going on with Georgia Power to what's happening with 3 leading states in community solar utilities, Ngrid XL and ComEd. The point here is not that community solar makes utility rates go down. First of all, community solar is an extremely small part of what utilities spend. But the question is whether the trends in states with high community solar investment are favorable compared to the trends which you've experienced where you do not have much of anything of a community solar program currently operating. Georgia Power has one. I'll leave that one off to the side. And the point here is that utilities face inflation. They face rising costs. They have to come in for rate cases in order to provide us that safe and reliable service that they always do. But the states, at least we have from this data, and we can mine it to get the details, the data we have here is that in the states with high community solar program, large community solar programs, the rates of increases are slower. And that's money in everybody's pocket. So with that, I'll end my comments and thank you for your attention and look forward to having more discussions as we go forward or any questions if we have any right now.
Thank you so much. I think we do have a few questions. Representative Gullett, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. I enjoyed the cost shifting and wanting to spit after that just cracked me up for some reason. I do have a couple questions. One, if this program is so good, because there's a lot of, if this program is so good, why are we only targeting Georgia Power and not the co-ops?
I don't know Georgia legislative jurisdiction, but two things to say about co-ops. First of all, co-ops are supposed to be sort of democratically organized again and following the cooperative principles, with the ratepayers being this identical to the owners. And they are supposed to use their process of electing boards and, you know, hiring managers to make collective decisions. So to the extent any of them do any solar, they're already doing a kind of community solar by jointly participating all at the same time. But the tradition across this country is also, because of that organizational concept, we generally don't use legislative or regulatory power to tell them what to do. I'm one of those people who actually did regulate electric co-ops when I was a commissioner. We had 84 in Texas at the time. And I will tell you, my personal experience is that there are some times when they're smaller, they're less well staffed. Oftentimes they don't have the, you know, the extensive lobbying, regulatory, engineering teams that an investor-owned utility does. There are times when you kind of have to tell them what to do, but there are other times when it was always my practice to say, if this is what the members want, this is what the members do for them. I would, if I was talking to a cooperative, I would encourage them to do it. I did that when I was a Pedernales member in Austin, and they started building some solar and offering some programs. But that's my rant on co-ops. It's really your judgment as to whether it's best policy to let them run or to step in sometimes. The good news is there are backstop mechanisms. Usually in Texas, the Public Utility Commission actually reserved backstop rate challenge review for co-ops even after deregulation.
Great. Yeah. Thank you. I have one more quick question on the deregulatory aspect of this. I know we're talking a lot about cost shifts, and maybe that was what your presentation is about. Maybe you're not equipped to answer this, but it seems like the deregulation is what the bigger concern for folks outside of, you know, cost shift is an argument for why you don't need this, but deregulation is the worry. And so, you know, what's your response to that? If a co-op says, hey, you know, this doesn't affect us, but the deregulation would, and that's what's scary to us, what's your answer to that?
Yeah. A community solar program is a million miles from deregulation. It is not about It is not about choosing your supplier and forcing the utility solely to act as a transmitting, or we used to say in the day, a wheeling organization, right? You're still getting served as a customer by the utility. You're still 100% dependent on them for keeping your lights on and getting your cookies and your turkey baked at Thanksgiving, right? If you don't use gas. And so deregulation is about breaking up the wholesale monopoly that Georgia Power currently exercises, either as the producer or the buyer of all electricity, including the output from a community solar facility, and then taking responsibility for every step below that and allowing those wholesalers and suppliers to have direct connections with individual customers. And maybe preserving a transmission and distribution system operator, kind of like a toll road operator for the electricity system. So we're not anywhere near that. All we're doing here is the same exact thing that Georgia Power has tried to do, but not really huge success on with its community power program, and introducing a market-based pricing and development mechanism to go along with it. From my time in the Army and messing with Department of Defense type things in various ways, I think of it as kind of a fly-off kind of strategy. If community solar is something Georgia Power thinks its customers want, I think it's in your best interests as policymakers to create a competitive alternative to that in order to create a little bit of the price discipline and the market improvement that you get by introducing just a little taste of competition into the socialized monopoly world of, and the investor-owned utility model. And it can't succeed unless customers subscribe. No credits are earned unless the facilities operate. It's a pure performance market-based option, anything but deregulation. Yeah, go ahead.
And if I could just add briefly on deregulation, you'll see in your packets that we provided the list of states that do have third-party community solar. Most of those are not deregulated states. The lights still work. Power company still exists. This is kind of like a slippery slope, fear-based argument, and it hasn't happened in the states that have tried it already.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Representative Gullett. That was an excellent question. Does anyone else have a question? All right. Thank you so much, Mr.
Thank
Chair,
you.
Mr. Rubigo. We appreciate you being here today and your comments hopefully helped everyone. All right. At this point in time, we've got Georgia Power. It's going to come up. I see in your information, it said HB 1152 review. I just want to point out that, of course, that bill died when biennial ended the end of March. And so we will be, if we proceed with this, we're going to be working on a new bill. And that's to say it could be very different than what we did last year. So that's why we are here today. So any insight you'd like to provide, we'd appreciate.
Thank you. There we go. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Camp, Chairman Parsons, committee members and guests. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be with you today. My name is Wilson Mallard. I'm the Director of Renewable Development for Georgia Power Company. I've spent 27 years at Georgia Power, the last 20 or so working on renewable program and procurement design, which is what we're here to talk about today. I also am an energy nerd that hits home with me, and really spent the better part of my career over the years working on new and different ways to bring renewable generation to Georgia and to allow our customers to benefit from it. Certainly, solar is critically important to Georgia as a state and Georgia Power as a company and to our customers. We need lots of solar to support the growth that we all know is coming to Georgia. So we're really excited about it. I'll talk a little bit at the end today about how we're taking into account feedback that we're getting, how we try to make our programs better. But first, I will start with a review of community solar, third-party community solar, as been discussed today, as was put forth in HB 1152 last year, and talk about why doing solar in Georgia in that way does not deliver benefits to our customers in the same way that our renewable procurements do now. I'll just start by saying third-party community solar with a compensation scheme based on the retail rate is the most expensive type of solar you can buy. It's been said that solar is the cheapest form of generation. Well, absolutely, but it depends what you pay for it. If you can pay 3, 4, 5, 6 cents a kilowatt hour through a competitive procurement, that is a really good price. Georgia Power's residential rate, cents per kilowatt hour, averages in the 12-cent range. And going back to look at HB 1152, again, appreciate that, Chair Camp. I know we're not working on that bill, but just that language stuck out to me, page 4, line 86, that talks about the transactions are based on the retail bill credit. That to me says net metering. That to me says a retail credit. Also like to point out that the cost shift of paying a retail rate for a wholesale product absolutely is on the record and has been proved here in Georgia. Every 3 years through the IRP and rate case, we work with the Public Service Commission and all the interested interveners. And in just the 22 rate case, Georgia Power put forth a significant amount of information on the record that does actually show paying retail for a wholesale product causes rates to go up for everyone. So that's basic net metering. What this form of community solar is virtual net metering. It's gonna maybe even exacerbate the problem more. Now, solar is not limited to a rooftop size. Customers can subscribe to these projects that are spread around the state. In that way, customers can avoid paying their fair share of the grid. The company is buying this energy at a really high price because we're paying for it at a retail rate. So I can't emphasize that enough. It's community solar in this format is more than double the price that Georgia Power buys solar from similar type facilities right now. It also requires more generation reserves. The construct here put forth for community solar does not allow Georgia Power to have a long-term agreement with the community solar providers. And that way we can't count on that energy or capacity to serve customers. And so we're going to have to build extra generating reserves to cover the cost of running out of dispatch, to cover the cost of serving customers, because we can't count on these customers. That lack of a long-term agreement with the provider is a really big sticking point and devalues this solar as we try to serve growing load in Georgia. And y'all, I'm happy to answer questions at any time during and of course at the end, but please stop me if you have questions.
Well, I have a question.
Yes.
All right. So let's see, couldn't the Public Service Commission require long-term contracts for providers? I mean, they're building millions of dollars worth of infrastructure. Wouldn't the Public Service Commission have the ability to require long-term contracts?
They can and they do, and that's exactly how we procure DG Solar right now, through commission-approved programs that actually are pursuant to the IRP Act passed by the Georgia legislature back in the early 90s. And so we're required to, when we put solar on the grid, to run competitive RFPs,
Well,
except in a
that
few.
wasn't my question. My question was, if the third party, couldn't the Public Service Commission require a third-party DG provider to enter into a long-term contract with Georgia Power?
That's, yes, they can. The language of the legislation, Chair Camp, as I read it last year, did not provide for that, and in fact wouldn't allow for that.
Okay. Well, did Georgia Power bring any specific language to any member of the committee asking them to include that in?
So I think Georgia Power has put forth some of our ideas about how programs like this can and do work better.
Did they provide it in writing to any member of the committee?
I'm not aware.
All right, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Please proceed. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Representative Roman.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Just quick question for you. You mentioned that this would be more expensive for the consumer. Just so we can get an idea, are we talking like cents, dollars, hundreds of dollars? What's the range?
So ballpark price, when Georgia Power procures distributed generation from projects of this same size, 3, 4, 5 megawatts, we generally average around 6 cents a kilowatt hour. The construct here in this third-party community solar would provide for compensation based on the retail rate. Georgia Power residential customers, that's in the 12 to 13 cent range. So basically double the price that Georgia Power can procure solar from through our competitive solicitations.
All right, thank you so much. If you would proceed. Thank you
Yes.
for answering our questions.
Yes, and please, anytime, I'm happy to. So we heard a little bit about that community solar might not create a cost shift. I'm here to testify to you today that our analysis shows that it absolutely does create a cost shift. The customers that participate in community solar and have a portion of their retail bill revenue no longer paid to Georgia Power, but instead goes to the third-party solar provider, that creates a shortfall. Y'all, the cost of running the grid does not go away. Yes, there's some fuel savings for sure, and we'll take that into account. We talked about the prior speaker talked about the renewable cost benefit framework. That is a framework that we use at the PSC to value solar. It is a great way to do it. Y'all, the calculations there come up to solar being worth, I think the latest one this year is about 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And of course, it goes up over time. So if you average that out over a 30-year period, it's definitely higher. But that's the value that solar provides to the grid, not the retail rate. If customers do not, subscribing customer does not pay for their fair share of grid costs, those costs remain. And the costs get shifted through that regulatory process. We go through the IRP and rate case every 3 years. And so it's through that process, those costs would then be left uncollected. Rates would be recalculated, and all other customers would see higher rates to pay for that infrastructure that we're no longer recovering the cost from the participants. In the language of the bill last year, there is the ability for the Public Service Commission to make adjustments to that retail price that the price is based on, but it's limited to distribution costs only. We looked back at our cost of service study. Distribution costs are only about 15% of the overall fixed cost to serve customers. So the language of the bill as presented last year only allowed for a small adjustment to pay for distribution costs. That could leave as much as 85% of the cost that could be shifted to other customers. Again, the customer sends that revenue to the third-party solar provider. That provider has no obligation to serve customers 24/7 at night, on rainy days, no obligation for storm response or administrative billing. And so those costs left to be recovered from non-participating customers. Yes, question.
Thank you so much. Representative Drenner, do you have a microphone down there? Can you-
Yes. So the question, can I repeat the question? The question is, are we assuming that the subscribing customer is not buying any energy from Georgia Power at all? And the answer to that is no. And we've got an example in just a second that shows what a 2-block subscription might look like and what a customer's bill might look like before and after. But if you think about it, the customer is going to use less energy, and reflecting a credit for that is absolutely appropriate. The cost of the grid changed very little at all. The same amount of generation fleet, transformers, wire, all of those things don't change to still help serve that customer at their peak, even when they're subscribing some of their load through community solar.
Isn't it true? I'm sorry, Representative Drenner, do you have a follow-up?
Should I skip to my example? Maybe I will. And if you'll turn in your packet to the illustration here, and so maybe this is a good way to talk through the cost shift and how it happens. And so typical Georgia Power monthly bill right now is $165. These are based on just a couple months old, but the most recent update that we have. Yes, the cost of the entire grid and paying for the fuel, the grid, all the administrative costs are recovered through that $165 monthly typical bill. If a customer chooses to participate in Georgia Power's community solar program, the rates are constructed such that we make sure we continue to collect enough from that customer to pay those costs. They pay an administrative cost of about $25 a month. Contrast that to the third-party community solar construct. We did an estimate here. If a customer subscribed to 2 blocks, we did an estimate that said 2 blocks would produce about 300 kilowatt hours a month on average. Then that customer is only going to be billed for an average of 700 kilowatt hours a month, not 1,000. So those kilowatt hours still flow through their meter. They're still putting the same demand on the grid, but now there's a cost recovery shortfall of almost $50. Now, this is a high-level analysis. It does include both base and fuel. There would be some additional fuel savings. More sophisticated analysis using that our renewable cost benefit framework would be important here. But that $48 is a good estimate of the amount of revenue shortfall each month that a community solar participant under the third-party construct would be creating on the grid.
Looks like we've got Representative Ridley has a question. Please go ahead.
There is. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I don't mean for it to be that. There is some fuel cost savings, but there's also some additional costs in the administrative requirements, the billing data requirements. And so we did this high level analysis just to demonstrate the cost shift. A more in-depth analysis might produce a number that's higher or lower. I'll answer the question as far as what the savings are like with the old garden hose analogy. Think about the electric grid as the garden hose. That's how big does it need to be to deliver the water that you need at your house. The electrons that flow are analogous to the water that comes through. And so, yes, less water would be required, but the size of the hose doesn't change. The size, the amount of the infrastructure on the grid does not change because of the community solar subscription. Not for the 300 kilowatt hours that they're no longer paying to Georgia Power.
52. Isn't it true that that bill did have some recovery? Again, did Georgia Power bring any language to any member of the committee in writing asking for any changes to that previous language?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay. All right. And we also have Representative, oh, you want to follow up, Jordan? I'm sorry, Representative Ridley. Yes, yes. Representative Brad Thomas is via Zoom.
Okay.
And he's gonna, I don't know what he's
Hello.
gonna sound like.
Can you hear me?
Here he is.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Representative.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair Lady Camp. If we can try, I'd like to try and share my screen real quick. It might help add some context to the question. We're going to just try it real quick and we'll see what happens. Okay. Any luck?
Brad, you're in uncharted waters. You know how.
No, I know. I'm pushing the limits of the General Assembly today. If you don't, that's okay.
On
You
here
are,
that
my
I can
friend.
see y'all.
All right.
I don't have the Zoom on this laptop.
Is there anyone that,
Here,
House
let's try
Media
this. How about that?
thank you. There we go.
Yeah, it was
Go
on
ahead,
my
Representative.
side. How about that? Okay, so what I did is I pulled the expected earnings per share numbers since 2020, and then I back checked it to the actual EPS. And then I cross-referenced that to the rate plan increases over the last 4 years as well. I just want to start off by saying that basically, from what I've found, Southern companies beat earnings per share expectations in the tune of about $1 billion. With that being said, there's been 3 rate hike increases since since 2020. I just took the data back to 2020. Now, I hear you speak a lot about costs and cost shift, and listen, I completely understand that. I'm definitely a nerd when it comes to electrons, but I'm also when it comes to dollar bills. And I guess my big question to you is what I see here is an opportunity for free market principles to operate. And when I'm seeing that Southern Company is asking time and time again for consistent rate increases, beating expectations by 11% on average over the last 4 years, how do you integrate, or how do you think that we should move forward to be able to provide some free market principles into this market and give some opportunities from some outside investment money? Because obviously, to me, I see this and Southern Company's getting its piece. So, I'd like to hear a little bit about I've heard a lot about what you're not open to, but I would like to hear about what you are open to.
Yeah, thank you for that, Representative Thomas. And I'll see if I can answer that in a couple of parts. And so first, the amount of earnings that Georgia Power is able to earn and deliver to Southern Company, our parent company, that's determined in the rate case every 3 years through a really in-depth process, lots of interveners, lots of analysis, lots of expert witnesses that end up setting the company's return on equity. That fundamentally sets how much the company can and will earn over the next 3 years. community solar or any other net metering scheme is not going to impact the amount of earnings at all. Georgia Power is going to provide the commission with the expected revenue erosion there, and that would get incorporated into rate making, and the Public Service Commission take all that into account and set rates. That's why the costs are shifted to other customers. Georgia Power is not really impacted at all. It could be impacted within the 3-year cycle, but really what we're talking about here is a shift of the cost recovery from participants to non-participants. It wouldn't necessarily impact the earnings that Georgia Power is allowed. That is determined in that ROE calculation and determined one of the biggest items of discussion in rate cases. So in that way, the earnings are determined.
Thank you.
Yeah, is that, let me talk about the free market a little bit, and I'll get to this a little bit more in
But
just a second.
Would you mind though? Because I'd like to ask a question, just a verification question off of what you just commented to. So just so I understand how the money flows on the Georgia Power side, if community solar comes in, no matter what happens, Georgia Power is basically going to get its piece, right? So that it will not cut into any profit margin that Georgia Power creates. Am I right or wrong? Is that what I understood you to say?
Again, within a 3-year period, to the extent there's a shortfall in cost recovery, that could have an impact, but the returns are based on the amount amount of capital on the ground, the grid, if you will, the amount of generation and transmission and distribution. That's how that calculation is made to determine what the return for Georgia Power is.
Okay, I know it's not fun to be the presenter getting nailed with questions. So I would like to follow back up with you also. We can discuss that a little bit further. Okay.
Yes, happy to. And I'd love to make
you.
Let me make one more comment, Representative Thomas, about the competitive element. Y'all, Georgia Power we do have a vertically integrated state. We have the territories assigned to the providers in Georgia. We absolutely have a competitive market for generation in Georgia. Georgia Power is required per the IRP Act to run competitive procurements, except in some very limited circumstances where we can petition the commission to be able to build or to buy without a competitive procurement. All of the renewables that Georgia Power procures, almost all are procured through that process. 90% of the solar on the ground connected to Georgia Power's grid is owned by third parties. Georgia Power only owns about 10%. Almost all of the solar in Georgia is owned by solar developers. We have a somewhat unique DG procurement market here where DG developers can compete, but almost all of the solar connected to Georgia Power system is procured from a competitive market situation. So I want to make sure the record's straight on that. We absolutely have competition to put generation on the ground here in Georgia.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Tom. Just to follow up,
Mhm.
so based on the testimony you just gave, Georgia Power is guaranteed a rate of return.
No, that's not true, Chair Camp. We're authorized a rate of return by the Georgia Public Service Commission, and then it's incumbent on us to run the business as efficiently and as effectively as we can.
How much right now in the state of Georgia or Georgia Power territory is community solar? What percentage of your users right now are a part of a community solar program?
So right now there's about 2,000 customers that are subscribing to community solar. Georgia Power has 3 community solar facilities on the ground, but maybe I'll skip ahead again and show this map as a example. I want to make sure that the record reflects Georgia Power has an incredibly vibrant and active distributed generation market. Y'all, there's over 550 distributed generation projects, just like the community solar projects that we're talking about. Through the IRP process, Georgia Power has procured these types of resources that deliver all the benefits that we've talked about, and they're distributed and they're smaller and they are out there closer to the load. We've got almost 375 megawatts. And the opportunities continue. We just had procurement this year and we signed up, another 12 projects, another 40 megawatts, and there's another procurement ongoing right now. So we do have regular and predictable opportunities to get more community solar type distributed generation on the grid.
Now, the community solar that we were discussing, again, as you reference on your page, HB 1152, the maximum it could be was 30 megawatts, correct?
No, I think it should be 6 megawatts or
Okay, 6.
Yeah.
All right. So if we were classifying it as 6 and you just threw the number 40 out, isn't that a utility grade solar project at that point?
no, I'm sorry, and I wasn't clear. Thanks for asking. That's 12 projects that total 42 megawatts. All the projects are within 3 and 5 megawatts of memory serves.
Okay. And then Georgia Power has approximately 2.7 million customers in our state. Is that correct?
That's right.
So you have 2,000 out of 2.7 million that are participating?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. And going back to your grid here, again, it references HB 1152. That's why I keep bringing it up. And I believe there was a cap on the percentage that someone's utility bill could be and get this subscription. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, I thought it was 125%, which to me tells me that they could actually save more than what their bill is. It allows them to actually
I think,
subscribe to more.
I think it was 20% was the max, not 125.
I could be stand corrected if that's true.
And so based on your numbers, I'm not a mathematician, but I am a realtor and I'm really good on percents. And it says $165 is what the bill was before.
Mhm.
And if you were able to save 20%, that'd be $31 in savings. So your customers right now, it says, right now they're paying about $5 a month for an additional cost. So do they have any cost savings on their bill, or are they involved in community solar to be altruistic?
Current Georgia Power community solar customers.
Yes.
Yes, the customers do not save month to month on their bill, and here's why. The customers that participate in community solar are on the residential rate or the commercial GS rate. That rate design takes all of the cost recovery and bakes it into one energy charge. So there's not a separate demand charge, not a separate monthly access charge other than the base rate. So we're collecting not just for the energy, but also those fixed costs of the grid through that one single energy charge. If we don't collect that kilowatt hour, the revenue, the cost recovery for that kilowatt hour, we're not collecting the total cost that that customer has put on the system. So it's because of that rate structure. And there's a lot of really good reasons for that rate structure. Residentials, most of our customers, it's a very simple rate, just an energy charge, but that rate design means that any cost savings that a program like third-party community solar or Georgia Power community solar would create a cost shift. And that's against the principles of Georgia Power's program design.
Okay. Does anyone else have a question? Yes, Representative Ridley.
So even if every single one of your customers say they cost $48, you still be making $900 million under regulated area. So when you take that, and you're now saying that instead of eating the profit, you're going to go to the PSC to ask for a rate hike on one, even though you're not guaranteed a profit. So what you're saying is you're protecting your investment. When again, this is public information online. 70% of your investors are institutional, including BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. So what you're saying is you're going to protect their investment and help yours for giving tax credit and paying off the bill for builders too, so they might hold.
I can't agree with that description, Representative Ridley. What I can tell you is all the costs of running the business are evaluated in Georgia Power's rate case. Sources of revenue, sources of generation. We already heard testimony. A lot of things go up and down. It's through that rate case process with all the involvement from all the stakeholders, the expert testimony, that the commission ultimately determines what the appropriate return on equity is for Georgia Power. I certainly didn't say that.
All right. Well, anyone else have a question on this end? Representative Drenner, please go ahead.
Yes. Yeah. I understand your position. I might just very respectfully disagree. We run competitive, open market solicitations for renewable resources, really for all resources. We're required to, per the IRP Act that the Georgia legislature put in place back in the early 90s. In that way, it is open. It's open to any participants who would like to come compete and put their best foot forward on their project's characteristics and the cost that they're willing to charge. In the renewable procurements, over 90% of the solar that Georgia Power has connected to our system does belong to third parties, only approximately 10%. Those numbers are approximate. I can give you exact numbers if you need, but yeah, for the most part in the renewable space, third parties are the dominant provider in Georgia.
Thank you so much, Representative Drenner. That was a good question. All right, and I believe Representative Rahman has another question.
Later in your presentation, feel
Sure.
free to tell me to skip it, but first and foremost, you said one of the myths is that community solar is the most cost-efficient way to provide energy to the grid. You said that's a myth. The fact is that cost effectiveness of solar is dependent on the price paid. Solar procured at residential retail rates reflects a purchase price of approximately 12 cents per megawatt, or yeah,
Kilowatt hour.
kilowatt hour.
Yes.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I actually spent some time doing a lot of math, which I don't like to do. And as of right now, the average cost for our household is about 14.5 cents per kilowatt hour.
Mhm.
That has actually gone up from the year prior. And so my questions are going to be sort of based on that. So first and foremost, how many of the PSC members are Georgia Power customers?
I don't know.
You don't know how many of the PSC members you provide services to?
No, ma'am.
And then my second question to you is when we talk about things like cost shifting, and this is sort of the part that I'm confused about, it seems to me like the sticking point here is that you want community solar companies to treat you like a government entity where they submit sort of like, you know, if you put out like the equivalent of an RFP and they put in their proposal and then you decide if they get to be on the grid. And I think the argument we're trying to make is that it should not actually be up to the company because there are sort of competing incentives between sort of what we as government entities are supposed to do versus what you as a corporation have to do. And so from my end, I just got a text that none of them are actually Georgia Power customers, so they don't feel what some of us are feeling. In addition to that, and the reason I mention this is that going off of what Representative Ridley said, can you tell me how much expenses have gone up for Georgia Power? And I know we're not done with the full fourth quarter, but do you know around how much?
I just don't, I don't have that information.
That's okay.
I don't.
And feel free to correct me on my math if I end up doing this incorrectly. I actually did the math backwards last night. It actually turns out that if you compare Q3 2023 and Q3 2024, expenses for Georgia Power went down. Yet looking at my bill from literally, I went through 3 years worth of bills, it's consistently gone up. In addition to that, and I'm bringing this up for a reason because I just want you to see sort of where I'm going in my brain. The other thing is that we talk about how there's going to be cost shifting and it's going to create uncertainty for consumers. But I'll be honest with you, as a customer of Georgia Power, I don't have any certainty right now of what my bill is going to look like.
Mhm.
Forget, higher temperatures, changing whatever, extreme climate, whatever, all of that. Because of things like Plant Vogel that Georgia Power lobbied for, that we ended up actually taking the cost on for, I don't know why all of a sudden this thing that a lot of people want to invest in has become the sticking point in the problem. So if the issue is cost shifting and increasing cost to consumers, we're already there. If the issue is sort of lack of certainty, we're already there. If the issue is lack of, long-term contracts, I mean, Plant Vogel is probably one of the longest term, contracts, projects, whatever you want to name it. And, we invested as a state into that. And so I think the question for us generally is, if you've only been able to provide community solar to 2,000 out of your 2.7 million customers in however long you've been providing this, doesn't it kind of show that maybe there's something not working here and we should be allowed to try something new?
So I absolutely agree that we would like more customers to experience the benefits of solar. And we're looking to improve not just community solar, but all of our solar programs and to add some subscription options out there and to allow those benefits to be accessed by more folks. What I would want to make sure is reflected is that Georgia Power procures solar in the way that we do pursuant to the IRP statute that the legislature put in place, pursuant to the commission rules. Those are all done in a competitive way to keep costs just as low as we possibly can.
Mhm.
Yes, we're aware of the cost pressures on rates, and we really are doing everything we can to serve customers reliably and as affordably as possible. Thinking about a program design, which is what really we're talking about with community solar, our principals are going to say, we don't want to create a design that is not sustainable, that we might have to come back and undo later, which is what you see in some other states that have gone forward with net metering and some other programs. We want to design the program to begin with that doesn't have the cost shift, that doesn't, that is something that everybody can participate in. Gosh, those almost 600 distributed generation programs, those are delivering benefits to all Georgia Power customers. We don't sell the RECs out of state. We don't do anything like that. Those renewable attributes stay with our customers. They're just diluted across the entire customer base. And that's really the notion of kind of aggregated planning of and serving. We try to do the most good for the most customers when we make these program and procurement decisions.
Yeah. So, but again, you are asking for us to trust that you are going to do what's best for the consumer. I guess my other question to you is, do you know how much profit margins increased for the Southern company compared to last year?
I don't. I just don't have that information.
It's 40%. It's publicly available information. And so we're seeing these companies give their shareholders all of this benefit, and we are being, and I'm saying we as legislators are being asked to sort of protect something that just, to me personally, it doesn't make just mathematical sense. Your expenses went down, and I'm just comparing quarter to quarter. So I'm trying to do like apples to apples instead of apples to oranges. So your expenses had gone down, your profits had gone up, and yet for the average consumer, their bill has gone up an average of 20% on average, year to year. I compared month to month. I did it by usage. I tried to be as fair and, as possible to Georgia Power. I'm telling you, the amount of math I did is just like obscene. I haven't done this much math since high school, but this is the part that I'm very concerned about, is that we keep talking about things like cost shifting. Georgia Power has already done that to their consumers with Plant Vogtle. We're talking about things like lack of certainty. Georgia Power has already created that lack of certainty for consumers. We're also talking about the fact that, to me, it sounds like Georgia Power wants to be able to control procurement of solar rather than the PSC. And again, the PSC is, none of them are Georgia Power customers, so a lot of them are not feeling the squeeze that the rest of us are feeling, and I want to end with this, because of the laws that we wrote to benefit you, I actually don't have any capability to go to an EMC, for example, whose, entire model, frankly, is much more preferable because they are beholden to their shareholders, and their shareholders are their customers. Unlike Georgia Power, whose shareholders are not their customers for the most part. For the most part, there might be some exceptions. So based on what Chairwoman Camp had just said, I would very much like to see language that would allow for community solar to come to Georgia independent of Georgia Power. That's the thing that we asked during the last committee hearing. We asked this during session. We've asked this several times. I just do not think that, based on my experience, just as a customer, forget as a legislator with some of these, with some of the conversations I've had with your counterparts, my request to you is please give us language that would make this possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rahman. I have a question in the same vein, and please forgive me. I got cruddy last week, but I'm better. So if I'm a little crackly, forgive my crackly voice. But do all ratepayers pay the same amount? Because like data centers, do they pay the same rate as the 14.5 cents per kilowatt that Representative Rahman's paying?
No, Georgia Power has a portfolio of approved rates for the commission that are based on different customer types and sizes. You divide customers by residential, commercial, and industrial. And then underneath that, there's a lot of different rates available for customers based on how they use electricity. And so the rates are meant to have incentives, whether it's a time of use incentive, an hours use demand incentive, to try to minimize the cost that that customer puts on the system to send a price signal. And then beyond that, there's lots of other decisions that go in as far as how rates are set, how the prices are set. And that's, again, part of that complex process that happens in that rate case cycle every 3 years.
All right. So just to follow up, so our friends at the Public Service Commission, who are elected members of the Public Service Commission, they have the ability to set various rates based on a lot of different factors. And so, as the bill 1152 alluded, they would have the power to do that as well, correct?
They would have the power to set the credit, to adjust the credit mechanism. It's not my understanding from the reading of the bill, Chair Camp, that they would have any authority to have any jurisdiction over the price that the customer, Georgia Power customers, pay to the community solar provider. If I got it written here on page 4, line 76, it makes it specific that the transactions are not subject to the regulation under the chapter of code in which this bill was put forth. So
But
I've
we-
had a
but
little
we
hard
could-
time
we could
getting
change
comfortable with that too.
Yeah, we could change that.
Uh-huh.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Representative Ridley.
I think the answer is it depends, and it depends how they use electricity. We're going down in the weeds here. A customer with a load shape like this, who sets a very high peak but doesn't use a lot of electricity over the course of the day of the year, that's a more expensive customer to serve. Their rate, their cents per kilowatt hour, might be higher because we still have to collect for the peak and the generation and transmission, but we don't have that many kilowatt hours to spread costs to. Contrast that to something like a data center or any 24/7 operation. Their load shape might look more flat. And so in that way, they're less expensive to serve on a per kilowatt hour basis. There's a lot more kilowatt hours to recover those costs from. That's part of the calculus that goes into creating the rate design and setting the rates such that we collect costs appropriately as customers cause them.
Right. Do you have a follow-up, Representative Ridley? All right. Thank you so much. I believe Representative Thomas, are you still with us?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. Representative Thomas, please go. Question
Yeah,
for Mr. Mallard.
I don't want to belabor the point, but I'm going to bring up one other issue. You discussed that Georgia Power operates off of free market principles by allowing different companies to come in and provide solar projects. I just want to make sure I heard that right.
Yes, sir. The procurement of generation in Georgia is governed by the IRP statute and the commission rules that require competitive solicitations open to all players, including Georgia Power, including affiliates, except in a limited number of exceptions. So for the most part, we're governed by the IRP statute and those commission rules that require competition when we select new generation resources.
When you say we, who is we?
So it's done by Georgia Power in combination with the Public Service Commission staff and an entity called the Independent Evaluator. Again, commission rules require that a third-party independent evaluator oversee the procurement process. Ask any of the solar guys in this room, the rules are very specific. It's a very regimented process, all meant to produce the most competition possible, the fairest selection of resources possible. Georgia Power and the staff actually independently do the same evaluation and see if we choose the same resources in a typical RFP evaluation process. Once that selection is made, we then present that to the Georgia Public Service Commission. It's then up to the commission as to whether or not they certify the resources. Ultimately, it is the commission that decides whether that resource or portfolio of resources will ultimately be certified and will be constructed or purchased.
Who manages that construction after it's approved?
Manages the construction?
Yeah.
Question, Representative Thomas?
Huh? Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm sorry, I missed your question.
Oh, I was just curious. So after that project's approved, who manages the construction? Who manages the project after that?
Yes, if it's a Georgia Power self-build project, that would be Georgia Power, Southern Company Project Management on our behalf as we construct that resource. For all the purchase power resources, all the resources that you see reflected in the example DG map here, that construction's managed by the third party. Their only obligation to Georgia Power is to deliver the energy in the amounts that they said they would over the term they said they would for the price they said they would. They manage the construction risk in the purchase power agreement construct.
Okay. Yeah, all right, perfect. Yeah, I was wanting to kind of circle back around on that particular topic. Thank you. I have no further.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Lady.
Of course. Thank you. All right. Go
Okay,
ahead, Mr. Mallon.
I'm gonna jump back just a couple and I'll go quickly here. I know we've taken a lot of time. I wanted to hit a couple more points and then happy to answer any more questions. We've also heard on the record as part of this committee that the third-party community solar as put forth would not introduce any sort of deregulation risk and would have consumer protections. Is our reading of the bill that the consumer protections would be limited per that language in the bill from last time, where transactions would not be subject to regulation under the statute by the Public Service Commission? So to me, that limits a little bit how the consumer protections could work. And we've certainly experienced some issues with, say, rooftop solar providers here in Georgia. As it relates to the deregulation risk, the way we see it is now our distribution lines will be used by more than one energy provider to send electrons to a customer. If third-party consumers, if a third-party community solar provider puts energy on the grid and a customer gets a credit, that looks like a sale of electricity. That's electrons flowing down the same lines as Georgia Power's lines. That provider is not regulated by the Georgia Public Service Commission. If there was a dispute, I think it's likely that the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC, could assert federal authority and federal jurisdiction on our distribution lines. So that risk is absolutely there under the construct. And y'all listen, our market structure, we want to protect the market structure that we have here in Georgia. We've got one of the best electricity markets in the country. We've got a group of dedicated stakeholders that participate in our IRP process. We've got a vibrant renewable market. We've got a growing load in the state. It's because the state is such a good place to do business, and it's underpinned by the electric market that we have that provides that clean, safe, reliable, affordable energy. Putting that at risk for the benefits that this bill would provide is not in Georgians' best interest when we can deliver many of those same benefits through the existing processes that we have. I'll go quickly here talking about the way the bill is constructed and the balance of benefits between customers, non-participants, participants, and the developers who would benefit from the bill. The developers would really be able to use the grid for free. They'd pay their local interconnection costs. Any additional costs on the grid, there's language that would specifically restrict Georgia Power's ability to do interconnection studies to provide equipment on the grid that would ensure the safety and reliability of the grid. And that way that creates another unfair impact to non-participating customers. We'll talk about the four revenue streams. The solar developers, as we understand it, would be receiving an unknown and unregulated payment from customers that participate. Additionally, they could receive a payment as a qualifying facility from Georgia Power. The language was written as so it said only unsubscribed kilowatt hours could be bought in that way, but the PURPA Act of 78 doesn't differentiate. A future owner of that facility could demand QF energy payments from Georgia Power and be supported by federal law. The last thing I'll highlight here is the REC sales. As I mentioned earlier, when Georgia Power procures renewables, we retire those RECs either on behalf of the subscribing customer or on behalf of all customers. The construct put forth in third-party community solar would allow the developer to keep those RECs and potentially sell those RECs out of state with those renewable benefits, maybe not being enjoyed in Georgia at all. This visual shows the same thing. It shows the unregulated solar and the revenue streams that are available. Talk about just a couple of myths and facts from our perspective. We've heard some of the claims, and I just thought it would be helpful to put down for the committee on paper how Georgia Power views the facts as it relates to some of these myths. And so we definitely have community solar and other renewable options available for Georgia Power customers. Y'all, we definitely want and need more solar in Georgia. It is critical to the growth of the state, and we need to add solar. We just need to add it in a way that produces the best value for our customers. We do offer community solar, not as only a couple of thousand customers. We're evaluating right now how we can make some changes to our subscription programs to make them more attractive to customers. Virtual net metering doesn't shift costs. We've spent some time on that. It's our opinion that it factually does. And it's not the most cost-efficient way to provide energy to the grid. It just depends on what you're paying. Solar is a great energy resource. The value to the grid depends on how much customers pay for it. And a wholesale payment is a lot more valuable than a retail priced payment to all Georgia Power customers. The last one there, talking about private capital, and we've spent some time on this map already, but let me just reiterate one more time. The best way to procure renewable resources is through this commission oversight process. It provides regular, predictable procurement opportunities. It's been really successful, y'all. Again, we'll be over 400 megawatts when this last batch of projects comes online. We've got another procurement ongoing right now. They're going to continue for the foreseeable future. There will be no shortage of opportunities for distributed generation developers to find opportunity in Georgia. We never do really hit our targets. We procured 40 with a target that was triple that. And so those unfulfilled megawatts just roll over. And so we'll continue to have an opportunity for solar developers to come to us. Let me close by talking about some of the things that we've heard, how we're responding to them, and how we want to continue to improve both our programs and procurements. And so we talked about that existing process. We think modifying our existing procurement process is going to be the best way to go to enhance opportunity for solar. And so we want to continue to invite third parties to build and own solar in Georgia through the commission-approved PPA process. Those are 30-year PPAs, y'all. We can count on those, maybe 35. We can count on those resources and put them into our plan. We do want to offer access to as many customers who want to subscribe to solar resources as possible. We've got a really neat subscription mechanism offering for utility scale, and we're looking to expand that to smaller solar resources. We want to make sure that solar can help all Georgians, not just a subset of Georgians, and that we can count on that capacity to serve our customers. We'll continue to add through these RFPs. It will benefit all of our customers, and we'll continue to look to offer programs that offer benefits to low to middle income customers, so we can have viable options and take advantage of some of the dollars that are already out there. Lots going on. I really appreciate the feedback we got from the marketplace. We do feedback regularly with customers, with developers, to make sure our programs and procurements are meeting the market's needs. We went above and beyond this cycle as we get ready for our IRP filing in January. The commission required us to have a couple of feedback sessions. We went way above and beyond, invited in a lot of distributed generation solar developers, a lot of customers who might be interested in subscribing. And through this really robust process, over 20 different entities heard from, we're taking all that into account as we design and enhance our portfolio of programs. And that'll come out in the IRP process first quarter of next year. So in closing, Georgia Power is opposed to purchasing solar at a retail price. That's the most expensive type of solar. We're also opposed of shifting the burden of cost recovery from the grid, from customers who participate to those who don't. That's just not fair. And we're definitely opposed to deregulating a portion of the electric system, allowing unregulated providers to serve some of Georgia Power customers' needs. That's a step towards deregulation, in our opinion. But we do strongly support growing solar. It's a big part. I'll say it one more time. It's a big part of our future plans. We need solar. We need it procured in a way that provides the most value. We also want to meet customer needs by offering them opportunities to receive the benefits of solar through our subscription programs, and we're planning to grow those. And again, I'll tout that feedback process one more time. We can't design programs and procurements without good feedback from in venues like this and what we've heard and what some of maybe the needs are out there directly from interveners in the rate case, and then our one-on-one meetings with solar developers and customers. All that information is critical for us to try to design a portfolio of programs that does the most good for the most. With that, I can answer any more questions.
Yes, I believe that, excuse me, Representative Regina Ward Lewis has a question for you.
Thank you for being here in your presentation.
Thank you.
On your last slide where it says what's next for Georgia Power on community solar, the last point you make is develop additional renewable options for low-income customers.
Yes.
What do you have in mind and why specifically for that market segment?
So we've heard that community solar can provide benefits in the form of bill savings or sort of leveling, more hedging of bill impacts for customers. The group of low to moderate income customers is the most vulnerable there, the ones that would most benefit from that type of structure. We do have a low to income option right now in our community solar program. We haven't found a sponsor for that program yet. So we're looking at modifying that option, but also looking at some new options to take advantage of some funding that's already out there that we could then reduce the participation costs for low to moderate income customers, and in that way deliver more benefits in the form of savings to them.
Follow up. Did you say loan program?
No, I'm sorry. I did not. Low to moderate income program. We have a low income solar program right now. It's just not, it doesn't have any participants. We don't have anybody sponsoring that program as of yet, but we're looking to modify that and add some new options.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for that question. Anyone else? All right, Mr. Mallard, thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having
We
me.
appreciate you answering our questions. All right, next, we're going to have Mr. Chris Stevens from Georgia EMCs. I believe you're Coweta Fayette EMC. All right, wonderful. I want to point out too that the EMCs are not included in this bill because, as it was alluded to earlier by I think Mr. Rabago, the situation with EMCs is they're member owned, and those members have the opportunity to talk to their board member and move forward with that. So they are regulated in a different way because of the inherent structure of EMCs. So you're going to give testimony today, but there's no intent and no reason for us to ever include EMCs in a community solar bill.
Well, Chair Count, Chairman Parsons, members of the committee, thank you for allowing me. I'm Chris Stevens. I'm the president and CEO of Coweta Fayette EMC, and my remarks really reflect the House Bill 1152. So that's kind of what I want to refer to as I go through my comments. And I serve as the Solar and Electric Vehicle Committee Chair for Georgia EMC. I'm here today to share the Georgia EMC's perspective on HB 1152. And just as a background, Georgia EMC's, there's 41 co-ops that serve about 73% of the land area in our state over parts of 157 of 159 of our counties. In total, about 4.4 million Georgians get their power from an EMC. And I'll also preface my remarks by saying that we are not anti-solar. In fact, we have more than 1,500 megawatts of solar energy online today, enough to help power around 250,000 homes. And in total, Georgia EMC solar capacity is expected to grow to around 2,500 megawatts by 2027. To put that in perspective, Georgia EMCs have procured 1/3 of all the solar developed for electric co-ops nationally. We are the clear leader for solar among electric cooperatives in the United States. Also, today, there are 17 EMCs that offer some variety of community solar program, often referred to as cooperative solar, to their members, including Coweta-Fay EMC. On a statewide basis, over 57% of our EMC members have access to a community solar program through their electric cooperative. Now, as far as our industry's views on HB 1152, Georgia EMCs are united in our opposition to its provisions. And I'm sure the first question that most of you are thinking is, why are the EMCs opposed to a bill that only applies to Georgia Power as written? And that's a great question. And we believe the provisions of HB 1152 would do substantial damage to the structure of Georgia's electric market, and ultimately it would harm Georgia EMCs and our consumer members across the state. And for solar developers, we see HB 1152 as a dream piece of legislation. It allows any independent solar developer to set up as many 30 to 35 acre solar installations as they would like across the state and get paid in 3 different ways. 1, through direct sales of electricity to consumers and businesses. 2, they would sell any electricity they didn't sell to consumers back to the utilities, who would be required to buy the electricity whether they needed the power or not. And 3rd, they would retain and sell the renewable energy credits earned by the installation. In addition, HB 1152 mandates that the PSC create a bill credit mechanism that will reasonably allow for the creation, financing, and accessibility of aggregated solar facilities. Therefore, under HB 1152, there's essentially no way for a solar developer to lose money. And we believe government policy should not put its finger on the scales as this bill does, especially when many Georgians, consumers, will feel the fallout from this significant market disruption. And let's remember that according to the solar industry itself, Georgia is already the number 7 state of the nation for solar. And just a few months ago, in testimony on HB 300 from Representative Kelly, solar advocates brag that this ranking was achieved without state government-imposed mandates or subsidies. However, HB 1152 is both a mandate and a subsidy. HB 1152 requires for unfair pricing, undermines the utility's financial security by allowing solar developers to credit their consumers up to 125% of their energy requirements, and utilities will be required to institute yearly net metering for these customers. Any net metering of kilowatt-hour sales using any time period other than instantaneous is detrimental to an effective energy market because it ignores the market's price signals. This policy will shift cost to consumers who are not contracted with the solar entity. And we believe that outside voices supporting this bill, as we heard earlier in this last session, in the 24th session, that they would push to apply these bills to the provisions to EMCs. This will result in a significant cross subsidy from our EMC members to the customers of these new unregulated solar entities. These solar developers are independent power producers without any obligation to serve anyone. In fact, we were so concerned about this cross-subsidy effect that following the completion of the 2024 session, we commissioned a study to quantify the impact of the Georgia EMCs and their members. We hired GDS Associates, one of the state's most prominent rate consultants, to conduct this analysis. We recently received the results in early November, and I would like to highlight the key findings. If an average residential EMC member in Georgia who utilizes natural gas for heating were to sign up for a community solar program and subscribe for 125% of their anticipated needs, as outlined in HB 1152, the EMC would be left with around a $370 per year stranded cost. If an average residential EMC member in Georgia who utilizes electricity, total electric for heating, were to sign up for a community solar program and subscribe for 125% of their energy needs, as outlined in HB 1152, the EMC would be left with around $1,050 a year in stranded cost. These significant stranded costs would then require the EMC to recover this revenue by raising rates on all of their existing members. The level of the rate increase would depend on a number of factors, including the EMC's customer mix, the level of community solar participation, and the participant subscription amount. However, in the scenarios GDS ran, if 10% of an EMC members participated, A typical Georgia EMC member could see an increase in their power bills of about $100 per year to recover the stranded costs caused by the cross subsidy embedded in HB 1152. Finally, this bill will profoundly undermine the Georgia Territorial Electric Service Act, the cornerstone of Georgia's electricity market regulation that has provided for reliable, efficient, and cost-effective retail service since 1973. This act delineates service territories among Georgia Power, the 41 electric membership corporations, and the 52 municipal electric providers. HB 1152 weakens this foundational law by permitting unregulated independent solar developers to enter the market. This action disregards and substantially reduces the effectiveness of the Territorial Act. And you may wonder, does the Territorial Act still work for Georgia consumers 50 years after its enactment? I will tell you, yes, it absolutely does. And it is a significant engine for the incredible economic growth of our state has enjoyed over the past several decades. And do you think that Georgia would have been named as the #1 state in which to do business for the past 10 years in a row without an incredibly attractive electric market that keeps rates low while maintaining high reliability? Georgia's energy market is the envy of our neighbors, and it underpins our great economic success. So I ask you to consider the risk this bill, or that the bill, had on the success in order to promote the economic interest of independent, mostly out-of-state solar developers. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. I believe Representative Ridley had a question. Please go ahead.
That is, yeah, you're exactly correct. What we wanted to do is see how this bill, since it was preferenced that this bill could eventually, as in the 2024 session, that it could eventually apply to EMCs. So we wanted, and we were so concerned, we wanted to understand the impact that bill would have on our members. So that's the reason we conducted the study. Yeah, correct, correct. That's correct.
All right, thank you. Representative Ward Lewis, do you have a question? All right, please go ahead.
Hear your testimony on this end, but I believe I heard that 1152 is a mandate and a subsidy.
That's correct.
Can you briefly explain? how
So
it's a
the mandate
and a
is the
subsidy?
fact that if they have excess, or if they have energy that is not subscribed, then we're going to be required to purchase that energy from them, whether we need it or not. So that is in itself a mandate.
Can I intervene? Isn't that a FERC requirement? That's a federal requirement, isn't it?
You're required federally up to, based on the Cogeneration Act, up to a certain amount. We don't necessarily have to buy, based on the existing Cogeneration Act, up to 0.2% of our overall capacity. After that, we don't necessarily have to buy. And I don't want to get too deep. I may be out of line with the purple requirements as far as qualified facilities, but under the Cogeneration Act, we only are required to buy a certain amount of energy from our members.
Go ahead and follow up.
And how is it a subsidy?
How is it a subsidy? Because of the cost shift, and we've heard this a lot. So the way this bill and the way it was written is the solar industries would allow these members or these customers to be able to purchase bill credits. So on a day when the sun is shining and there may be not a high demand for energy, they're building credits during those hours. And so today, the sun's not shining, the members are connected to the grid, they're utilizing energy. And let's go back to, say, January 17th of 2000, this year. We peaked at 7 o'clock in the morning. We set a system peak. There was zero solar contribution done that time. But if you had excess credits, then you could apply that during those periods. You got to understand the cost of energy during those high demand times. We had to build these facilities and we had to make that investment in those facilities. We had to recover that cost, even though they're applying those credits that they earned when there was a low demand. So it is shifting cost from those who are not participating. They're having to recover because they're buying the energy from the system. The solar customer is using that same generation capacity, but they're applying credits that they earned when it wasn't a great demand. So it's shifting that cost, if you follow me.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for answering, and thank you, Representative Ward Lewis. I believe Jordan Ridley has a follow-up.
Mhm.
And we're very transparent. We're electric cooperatives. We're member owned. You know, we operate at a nonprofit status. Our margin's 2 to 3%. So any costs we incur is passed through our members. There's nothing that's not transparent about us.
Thank you. So I'm a member of 2 EMCs, and my family right now, we're paying bills at 4 different EMCs. So I guess we're participating in about 10% of the EMCs in our state, which is pretty impressive. But just from a consumer standpoint, the Georgia EMC hired a company to conduct a study
Mhm.
on a bill that doesn't exist.
Mhm.
And to my knowledge, no one's ever said the EMCs were going to be included. So what was the cost of the study?
I don't have the number for that cost.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Representative Rahman has a question for you.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens, for being here. To be quite honest with you, if it was up to me, I would, subscribe to an EMC, because at least you are beholden directly to us rather than through, a PSC, and then there's like shareholders, because the people are the shareholders. I think my concern though is, and I hear your argument about why you're wading into this, and I see sort of all of these signatures on a lovely little thing that says why we oppose House Bill 1152. But even speaking with your colleagues during session, and when we talked about one of these issues, when I first came on, I sat down with them and I said, I want to see more renewables, and I want to see a way to figure out how we increase either increase competition or lower costs, because it doesn't seem right to me that you get the power of the state, which is what's happening. I mean, people can argue this, but you are using the power of the state to maintain your market share. And not just you, but like that's what the Territorial Act is. That's why there was like a whole fight about it in the 70s. I hear it. No one's arguing that we need to turn into Texas, I promise. But it seems to me that we're in a catch-22, which is that if you compare utility, wires and poles and stuff to roads, and each road is owned by a company down to the block or down to whatever, like lane, whatever you want to call it. And I've got a new car that none of you seem to like. I'm not saying they don't like solar, but like it's a new car that you're not sure about. I have no roads to drive it on, right? I have no way outside of working in your system, almost like a governing body, to be able to use the roads that, by the way, are in multiple ways subsidized by us, whether it's legislatively or sometimes financially. So I would love a way out of this catch-22. I would love a way out of this so that way we can figure out some solution. Because the question I've had for people, you guys keep talking about cost shifting, and with you guys, I understand how, like, I actually do understand the argument with you all. My question to you is that, what is the range of cost, right? Like, what is the highest end of cost to the consumer? And then what is the lowest end of cost to the consumer? Could we negotiate some sort of good middle so that the cost shifting that you guys keep bringing up, which frankly is trying to future-proof your investments, could there be a middle ground to get there?
Well, let's just think back. I mean, you have to go back and look at the Territorial Services Act and understand it was kind of the Wild West before it was created. So what that did for us is it gave us certainties. And so what it did is, yes, it gave us a market to serve, but we also had the obligation to serve everyone. And so when you enter these other markets, so what that allowed us to do, really, it created efficiency and economies of scale, created the fact that we could plan for those systems. And so we could look at our growth, we could understand that. So you have the integrated resource plans. We're looking 10, 20 years out. You don't build these facilities and these generation and transmission grids overnight. So we have to think about and look at our growth. So that creates reliability. At the same time, the economies of scale create affordability. So that's kind of how we look at that. And then when someone comes in and starts disrupting and changing that model, then those investments we have, it changes the structure, but you're going to lose a lot of the affordability, when you look at how the territory and why it was described and why it was formed, was for that premise. And so we've invested hundreds of millions of dollars to make sure that when you flip that switch, the lights come on. If the sun isn't shining and it's 7 o'clock in the morning and it's 10 degrees, you want electricity. And we have to build a system to make sure that we do that.
I guess if I could give another analogy. So it is literally constitutionally mandated to have the US Postal Service, right? It is in our Constitution. We spent a lot of money on it. And then you had folks like UPS and FedEx come in, but they were able to come in under the guise of, competition. And now we're seeing sort of that derail a little bit, maybe a lot of it. But even in that instance, there was still a method for them to operate, right? They bought their own vans, they bought their own facilities, they bought their own whatever. In the case of community solar, you're not paying for their investments.
Well, listen, the analogy electric vehicle. You
Yeah.
guys had the same situation come up where you saw that electric vehicles were not paying their fair share of that road tax. Correct?
Sure.
They were utilizing the road,
Yep.
but you had concerns. So you guys had to step in and change provisions. So that's kind of how this model works as
Yeah.
we see it.
But unfortunately, I mean, even if anybody in here has electric vehicle, you know that when you renew your registration, you have to pay an arbitrary fee. That fee was literally determined based on average usage and then doubled arbitrarily by the person who wrote the bill. We're not, I think, and I don't want to speak for all my other, colleagues here. We're not trying to do anything arbitrary here. We're actually trying to be as careful as possible. We're here off session.
Mhm.
We are looking for a solution for consumers. And again, like I said, if I could switch to an EMC where I have more say, I would. The problem is I think y'all are getting caught in crosshairs, and I'm really worried about it because the model we're worried about is not yours.
Yeah, we're referencing the way how HB 1152 is written.
All right. Thank you so much. And thank you for coming here today and speaking, even though this bill last year and future legislation will not impact EMCs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to have a little change of order because we have someone who needs to catch a flight. James Feinstein with Arcadia. If you can come on up. Thank you so much. Appreciate all our presenters today. And I'd like to say thank you especially to Bailey Jordan, who is up walking around now, and Dendrick Atkins for all of their hard work preparing for this meeting today and all they're doing behind the scenes to make this possible. All right, Mr. Feinstein.
Thanks. Chair Camp and esteemed members of the committee here today, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I'm James Feinstein, Director of Policy at Arcadia Power. Arcadia Power is a community solar subscriber manager, which gives us robust insight into the community solar customer experience, which I look forward to detailing for you today. So first, Arcadia, as a climate tech company, we have two main business streams. One is energy data access. So we help a number of rooftop solar and energy storage companies figure out how to size systems and when to dispatch power. But most relevant for today's discussion is our community solar business. So for community solar, we have over 200,000 subscribers and over 2 gigawatts of capacity under management today. Of those 200,000 subscribers, over 71,000 are verified low income in their existing community solar markets. So when community solar was originally established, one of the main purposes was to bring the benefits of rooftop solar to the 2/3 of Americans who can't participate in it. That includes renters, people with low credit or FICO scores, and anyone with a shaded or unsuitable roof. So as a community solar subscriber manager, we're somewhat distinct from the other panelists today. And we never own or operate the projects, but instead those projects hire us to manage all customer-facing facets of the project. So we enroll and educate customers. We walk them through signing subscriber agreements and disclosure forms, which detail in plain English their customer terms, including guaranteed savings. And we make sure customers pay their bills and receive their savings. And then we handle all interaction between the customer and the utility. To understand what it's like to be a community solar subscriber, I think it's most helpful to take an example customer. So let's imagine a Georgia Power customer with a $100 power bill in a given month. If they're not enrolled in community solar, they would owe $100 to the utility that month. If they are, however, enrolled in community solar, we will do our best to match their subscription to that $100. So that customer would receive a bill from Georgia Power for $100 of usage and $100 of bill credits. And that'll mean they have a total there to Georgia Power of $0. Of course, that customer doesn't get free power for the month. They get a discount on the credits generated by their subscription. So assuming they have a 10% discount, which is an industry average, they will get $10 off their monthly bill. So that customer will owe $90 for their power bill for that month. So they spend $10 a month less with community solar than they would have without, all while supporting local distributed energy and local jobs. So on page 8 of the packet is a example of like the Arcadia bill display that we use today. So this is a real Baltimore Gas and Electric, so Maryland community solar subscriber today. As you can see there, that customer, they have a total number of charges from the utility totaling $302.56. So that's what their usage would be and what they'd pay without any community solar subscription. Because they're enrolled in community solar, they are receiving a $10.06 savings for that month, which reduces their bill straight up by that amount. To be sure, this is a very low subscription amount, but it's a great real example of how this works. So lastly, I know the committee has had a number of questions about consumer protections. So it's our strong position that consumer protection should always be a foundational component of any community solar program. Most importantly, programs should always guarantee savings. That means customers should always pay less for the credits they receive than the credits they receive. So it's a common requirement in most community solar markets where you receive more than you pay. And in addition, other so that guaranteed savings requirement creates a unimpeachable product where every customer is better off with community solar than without. Other consumer protections that are common in other markets and do a good job protecting customers include prohibitions of early termination fees and credit checks for residential customers. Both of these have no bearing on project financial viability and establish needless barriers for customer access. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and I look forward to your questions.
All right, thank you so much for being here and for that information. Does any committee member have a question? No, I guess you were pretty thorough. Thank you so much. All right, thank you, thank you. And time is a whittling away. So it looks like our next person up is going to be Mr. Brandon Smithwood with Dimension.
Good afternoon. I just get myself situated here quickly. Alrighty. Hello, Chair Camp, members of the committee. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Brandon Smithwood. I'm the Vice President of Policy for Dimension Energy. We're a national community solar developer. We're based here in Atlanta, Georgia. We, since our founding in 2018, have deployed over $600 million in capital, 500 megawatts of projects. In the next few years, we're hoping to do many multiples of that, 2,000 megawatts and $3 billion. And we'd like to direct some of those funds to Georgia. Before I get into my presentation here, which I've been asked to discuss project development and project economics. Before I get into that, I did want to just cover a couple things that have come up in the conversation, presentations and questions. The first is just on the issue of EMCs or co-ops as they're called in other states. There's 21 states that authorized third-party community solar. Not a single one of those states have required co-ops to participate. Co-ops are typically not regulated by state regulators, in large part because their governance and their incentives are a lot different than investor-owned utilities. They're owned and controlled by their customers. They don't have shareholders, institutional shareholders that they're responsive to. And I think the statistics mentioned today kind of bear out why a third-party community solar program is needed for the IOUs, but not for the co-ops. Members in these co-ops have created community solar programs that, to Mr. Stevens' testimony, has created the 55% of members have access to a community solar program. Based on what we heard from Mr. Mallard today, Georgia Power only has 0.07% of customers able to access community solar. So this is why 21 other states have created this kind of legislation, both regulated and unregulated, regulated and deregulated states. Because to create access to these kind of programs, you need to pass legislation. The other piece that I wanted to address is Georgia a competitive marketplace? And to that, I'd answer simply, you don't have a market if you have one customer. I think the Public Service Commission is owed credit for using power purchase agreements and the solicitation process to bring the cost of projects down. But you can't get the other benefits from these projects that are down by the customers. And you can't have a truly competitive market if you still have one customer for all those projects. Then the last thing I want to address just before I get into my prepared comments here is on the issue of cost shift, and Mr. Scher and Mr. Robigo addressed this at length, so I won't repeat what they said. I think that what you see in Georgia Power's presentation is really the fallacy of the math that results in a cost shift, which is someone's bill went down, but no value was created. And I think both Mr. Robigo and Mr. Scher went through the math of here's the value that's created. And that's to the benefit of ratepayers, that's to the benefit of customers. And if the utility is accounting for those resources, it's not necessarily to the detriment of their shareholders. But it does create some competition without deregulation. So I know we're short on time. I did want to address those issues. I'll turn now to my prepared remarks and talk about community solar development and economics. This is a graphic here that was prepared by the Coalition of Community Solar Access, and as a member, I took the liberty of using it because it's quite good. As you can see, the community solar development process is actual multiple processes, some of which overlap, some of which require one step to be conducted before the next. It's a multi-year process that results in the development of a multi-million-dollar project. It is the project developer and owner operator, like companies like to mention, that bear the risk if projects are not reaching completion or underperforming, are not reaching subscribers and are not benefiting or not, excuse me. Community solar project is a multi-million-dollar investment. It's the project developer and owner operator that bear the risk of projects not reaching completion or underperforming, not subscribers or ratepayers. My slides provide an overview of the development process, which is applicable to the markets we operate in and would be applicable for Georgia. For each step of the development, construction, and operation phases of the project lifecycle, I'll highlight the cost, risks, and economic development opportunity. To make this concrete, I'm going to share the example of two brothers, Steve and Scott Wine, who raised cattle in Waynesboro, Virginia, and the project that was developed on their land starting in 2020. The project was completed last year and now provides over $150,000 in savings to Virginians every single year. All right, so first step of the process is site origination, site control, initial design. Our projects are on land owned by farmers, industrial sites, and warehouses. Before we have any contact with landowners like the Wines, we review local grid infrastructure, zoning laws, environmental hazards, topography of the land, and other factors to identify properties that are probable locations for a successful project. We reach out to those property owners, and if they're interested in proceeding, we sign an agreement that allows us to lease their land for 25 or more years, should the project be viable. Having this contractual relationship allows us to do pre-development work at the site and with the local government and utility. This contractual right to do pre-construction work is referred to as site control. The Wine brothers, whose picture you can see here on this slide, and their sister considered what was best for their property for the next 25 years. They decided that a community solar project was the way to keep their property and agriculture into the future. 34 acres within the project's fence line were a lifeline to their 600 acres of pasture land they own in town. To quote Steve, "This is a fixed income we know is going to be there. I love farming, and this was an option we had to lighten the burden." With site control in place, we can proceed to permitting and interconnecting the project. During this process, we hire a number of local folks, including attorneys, surveyors, engineers, to conduct studies. We spend about $200,000 to do that work at risk. We also work with the utility to get interconnected. So that process, they do a number of engineering studies, and they will, if there are impacts on their grid, they will come and say, this is what needs to be done to make it safe to operate your project. And we're on the hook for paying those upgrades. Going back to the Virginia example, the Wines project was brought before the Board of Supervisors and the Zoning Board of Appeals in 2021 and was awarded its necessary permits. The scale and impact of the project on the local economy made sense for Augusta County. To quote County Supervisor Scott Seaton, "In Augusta County, we voted to approve a shared solar project. We saw the shared solar project as a win-win for our community. The project will create jobs, generate tax revenue for our county. The landowner will receive lease payments, and the subscribers will save money on their energy bills. What's not like to like?" While the project was being considered by the county, we did a year of interconnection studies with Dominion Energy, the utility that owns the local distribution grid in Waynesboro. And to proceed, we had to pay about $1 million upgrade to deliver power to the local substation that serves the growing area around Stanton, Virginia. We were able to pay this upgrade and take that investment at risk, knowing that the rules were in place at the Public Service Commission, what's called the SEC in Virginia. And now it was on us to actually bring that project to completion on time and on budget. Virginia's like most states in that the community solar regulations require projects to receive discretionary permits and an interconnection agreement before being awarded a place in the program. This requirement prevents speculative projects. However, it means that developers must take at risk several $100,000 of development work, plus the cost of an interconnection.
May I interrupt at this point? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So the Public Service Commission, or the equivalent in Virginia, had to approve this project, correct?
No, it set out criteria which qualified your project for the program.
So, all right, your site selection, how did you come up with that was an ideal place for community solar?
So we looked at Dominion's distribution grid where their substations were, the type of wires that they had there. So, you're looking for a 3-phase where you see the 3 wires at the top. You typically don't want to be far from the substation. You want to be a mile, 2 miles at most. So we were looking at their infrastructure. We were looking at the county zoning, right? You don't typically want to put one of these projects in a residentially zoned area or, someplace that the town clearly wants the development to go a different direction. We're looking at floodplains. It's a lot of desktop work and going and visiting the site to see if there are no-goes on that property that are going to make it not possible.
Follow up, did Dominion have any input on your site location?
No.
Okay.
Which I can't think of a market where they do.
Okay, all right. I believe Representative Regina Ward Lewis has a question for you as well.
You mentioned that you sign option agreements for 25 years with the landowners.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious to know whether or not those agreements include provisions for decommission.
Yes, they do.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, please proceed.
All righty. So permits and interconnection in hand, the project proceeds to final design, construction, and energization. To use our example of the Wine Families project in Waynesboro, construction began in spring of 2023. To do this work, we created 30 jobs. I will note CCSA status 16 because that's full-time equivalent. Not all of our 30 jobs were a full year. So 30 different individuals on our projects, and that included everything from civil engineers to general laborers, equipment drivers, road builders, fence builders, broad set of jobs that I've outlined on this PowerPoint. Regulations in Virginia grant 2 years to construct the project. There are also no provisions, as is the case in every state, for us to collect cost overruns. So we had to continuously manage the impacts of weather, interest rate changes, supply chain disruptions, and other challenges to bring the projects online. The inability to collect costs for overruns or delays requires us to run an efficient operation, ensures our subscribers and ratepayers get the most value for the project. While the Waynesboro project was under construction, over 1,000 residential subscribers were signed up just for this one project. We worked with our partner community housing partners to subscribe many of these customers in partnership with Arcadia Energy, whose representative you heard from earlier today. Community Housing Partners is a housing provider with apartment and single-family homes across the Virginias and the Carolinas. CHP helps their residents manage tight budgets and saw shared solar as a tool to bring down costs for families that lived in their communities. So once the project is constructed and energized, so Dominion did its tests, make sure our project was built as designed and safe to operate. Now that project in Waynesboro is operating. The family receives tens of thousands of dollars every single year. As I mentioned earlier, that's what is keeping their 600 acres in agricultural production. A local shepherd comes through about 4 times a year to graze his sheep, which is a substantial source of revenue for him. And Arcadia manages the billing and customer subscriptions, and Community Housing Partners continues to enroll residents to replace those that move, as well as those that want to sign up to our other projects around the state. We have about 14. And then Dominion obviously has to manage it on their side of the ledger, applying bills to the customer's bill. In Virginia, we have something called net crediting, where we can settle up on the Dominion bill. We pay Dominion for that service so that the customer has one utility bill and doesn't receive a bill from us. Last slide here, and this kind of is outside of how a project gets built and all the pieces that are put together. But there have been questions about how do community solar projects make money? And I think some misstatements made earlier today about what the revenue streams are. Developing and constructing and subscribing to projects is pretty complex. The finances for these projects are pretty simple. The revenues that we earn are from the subscribers, the subscription fees that we charge those subscribers for the project. In my written testimony, I explain the process that we go through for subscribing a customer, sizing their subscription, crediting their bills. I think Mr. Feinstein addressed that really well, so I'm not going to repeat it. But I will just give the example of the Waynesboro project that I've been discussing today. Using that project as an example, about 1,000 customers are subscribed. Each subscriber's portion of that project is sized based on their annual usage and the amount of solar that's needed to offset that usage. Should a resident of Community Housing Partners, say the Smith family, want to sign up, they will provide a utility bill to CHP. That bill will show how much energy the family uses, allowing for the subscription to be sized by Arcadia. For example, 5 kilowatts may be needed to produce an amount of energy equivalent to the Smith family's electric usage. Arcadia will include the Smith family's portion of the project in their report to Dominion with all the other subscribers and their portion of the project. Dominion will multiply the Smith family's portion of the project by the project's production to determine the Smith family's bill credit. The Smith family will then pay a portion of their bill credit to us as the subscription fee. That's a set amount. To give a simple example, if they got $100 bill credit and we have a 10% savings agreement with them, they will pay $90 to us. As I mentioned, in Virginia, we pay Dominion so that we can settle that all on one simple bill. In Virginia, our customers save about $160 a year after paying subscription fees to us. We estimate that similar customers in Georgia would save about $200 due to higher electrical rates and greater solar production in the state. The financial structure for community solar with guaranteed savings and flexible subscription terms means we're laser focused on the project's energy production. More power production means more savings for our subscribers and in turn, more revenue for us. If there's something that reduces production, that directly reduces our profitability. So thank you again for having me here. I hope this explanation of the process, as well as the story of the wine family, has been helpful, and I'm looking forward to your questions.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smithwood. I believe Representative Ridley has a question for you.
Yeah, I'd have to look at their example to do a pure apples to apples, but I can tell you how I got this. Basically took a retail rate credit, and I know the bill from last session didn't specify that, but to keep the math simple, multiplied it by 1,000 kilowatt hours per month times 12 months per year, and then assumed they had a 10% savings rate. So multiplied it by 0.9 and came out to 200 and change per year.
All right. So based on this slide, the project revenue for the developer would come from the subscriptions.
Correct.
Any cost that is from the power generated would go to the credit for the consumers who are subscribed. Is that correct? On
Sorry,
their
could you
bill.
repeat that? Any cost from the?
Sure. Like, so the dollars or the cents in this case per kilowatt that Georgia Power would be paying for the power that's produced by these solar installations, that money would be used to offset people's bills, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it would not be an additional source of revenue for the developers.
No.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Smallwood. Appreciate you being here. All right, next up, we've got Jonathan Roberts with Soltage.
Good afternoon. I don't see my presentation. Is it on their computer or?
Justin with House Media. You can help us out with Jonathan Roberts with Soltage's presentation.
I don't believe I have that one yet.
Okay, apparently he does not have it in hand.
That's okay.
Can you
I
talk us
can,
through it?
I can talk you through
All
it.
right, and it'll be in it's in the packet for committee members. And we are kind of in a time as of the essence. I think our Georgia Tech students may have left. Hopefully they didn't go too far. So if about, I don't know, about 10 minutes, is that going to be okay?
Yes.
All right,
Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you.
All right. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Jonathan Roberts. I'm Vice President of Development with Soltage. With Mr. Smithwood's presentation, as a developer, you see a lot of the things that I do in my day-to-day job. I'm a resident of Georgia. I moved here last year with my wife and 2 kids. I live not too far from here, from the capital. Soltage, we are an independent power producer. We own and operate these community solar assets and other energy generating technology. We're based in Jersey City, New Jersey since 2005. We own and operate the solar facilities nationwide in about 14 states, including but not limited to the community solar variety we've heard a lot about today, as well as battery storage projects. We do a lot of battery storage projects in the New York City area, and I've been developing solar plus storage on my community solar projects in some other states, and I would be looking to do that here in continuing my development that I've been active in the state of Georgia. I also wanted to thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Madam Chair, and I would also like to thank Chairman Don Parsons for the creation of this committee. It's, I think, a committee that's giving a lot of ability to discuss this issue in a thoughtful way, and we appreciate the time and consideration. As I mentioned, I moved here with my wife, my 2 children to Georgia in 2023. I'm an engineer by training, and I've worked in the utility sector for almost 20 years, from thermal power plant construction, serving as an engineer for municipal utilities, consulting with investor-owned utilities on industrial energy efficiency, and working as a project manager building distributed solar generation in about 9 states. I manage a broad team to site where we build the projects, how we permit them, where we will connect them to the local distribution grid, and arrange for the power to be purchased, and prepare the asset for my company and our investors to own and operate long-term. I've managed about 72 solar photovoltaic projects through development, construction, and commercial operation across 9 states. And most recently of Soltage, I've deployed projects in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Illinois, and have been working to develop projects in Georgia for the Georgia Power RFP, and with hopes of someday being able to work on community solar projects in this state as well. My team have been developing projects in Georgia in efforts to respond to the Georgia Power RFP, as I mentioned, and we submitted bids last year. We worked on some projects this year and will likely submit bids next year to develop similar community solar projects in this market as we do in other states. My purpose in speaking today, as with my engineering background, was to focus more on some of the technical perspective of why community solar saves all ratepayers money and benefits the local distribution grid. I'd like to thank, the Public Service Commission for what they do for the state and their regulatory processes that enable the very robust and well understood interconnection practices that we heard some about in the last presentation of how we connect these assets safely and reliably to the grid. And a lot of what's happening with the Georgia RFP now with those projects, it's the same concept in terms of the technical aspects of how we, the developer, would work with Georgia Power to conduct the engineering studies to look at how to connect these assets to the grid. So much of what has been quantified relates to grid upgrades, deferrals, avoided costs that the utility and the ratepayers would otherwise incur that we are helping to offset. These direct grid-related benefits include avoided transmission. Community solar creates local energy, avoiding use of bulk transmission system and delaying the need to build costly and politically divisive transmission lines by serving the local distribution grids and supporting them. Fuel diversity. Fuel for solar generation is free. Distributed solar adds to the overall generation mix, reducing the need for the utility to purchase and transport fuels to existing power plants to meet demand, because our fuel source is free because it's from the sun. Solar energy also hedges against volatile fuel price spikes and adds to our diversification of how we get our energy by the different fuel stocks that we use in Georgia. And we use many, from hydro to coal to nuclear to natural gas to solar. Peak load reduction. By providing power at peak times, distributed solar projects also reduce the need to run expensive peaker plants, which carry the highest marginal costs of all utility generation infrastructure. Capital investment deferral. Distributed solar helps flatten energy usage during peak times, which lessens the need for lumpy capital investment in generation, transmission, and distribution capital investments, and allows for the deferral and avoidance of those projects. Line loss reduction. Traditional centralized energy generation incurs losses along distribution and transmission lines. When we move the power through the lines, there are losses that occur. And local power for local use on the local distribution lines, like community solar would utilize, helps reduce those losses. By siting projects closer to end-use customers that we're serving who are directly benefiting, whether they're a residence or a business, distributed solar can reduce transmission and distribution losses on the order of 3 to 6% for transmission and 5 to 8% for distribution. That's pretty substantial for the local production and usage where this power is being produced in this example for community solar. And then ancillary services. Distributed generation projects provide additional services such as voltage control and operating reserves, which helps maintain the reliability of the grid and competitiveness of energy markets. So I was going to conclude with walking through some of the slides, and I apologize I don't have them here today, but the members of the committee have them, and I'd be happy to answer questions. I did have an example of a specific project that I had developed in Georgia and how we had worked with Georgia Power to both study the project. I think we initially proposed in this specific example a 6 megawatt AC project, and with Georgia Power indicating that that location couldn't handle that size, we worked with them to right size it to a size that would work through their study process. So we downsized it to about 4 megawatt AC, and given average interconnection costs, part of the study, embellishes on what the costs are to connect the grid. I think I saw a slide in the earlier presentation from Georgia Power indicating that we don't pay any costs to utilize the grid, and we do. And in this example, in the slides, I share, something on the order of $500,000 to $600,000 for this particular project of the local line upgrades and infrastructure and some of these substation upgrades that are necessary to safely connect the device. So it's a process that exists now that, it's regulated by the PSC. We work very carefully with Georgia Power in the DG RFP to develop these assets. And it's a very similar process that we would utilize to, develop these projects on the Georgia grid with Georgia Power. And I did want to conclude with just a couple comments on just the state of Georgia. I included a snapshot, a spotlight of the state of Georgia by the Solar Energy Industry Association. That's a nationwide trade association for the industry. And it was mentioned by several others, including the gentleman that was here from the EMC, that Georgia ranks 7th in the United States for solar power generation. I think that's incredible. That's a testament to, the PSC and their wisdom and what they've, guided the state. It's, a credit to Georgia Power. They are doing good work in deploying solar. But I think what we're asking here today is for the community solar to find a way to help ratepayers save more money. I'm a Georgia Power ratepayer. I participate in energy efficiency programs to save money for my family, whether it's a thermostat that Georgia Power can call upon to help reduce load during peak times for my AC. That's something a lot of us in this room might participate in, to utility audits where they send Georgia Power sends someone to your home to look at how you can use your electricity more efficiently. I think those are examples of ways where an individual makes a decision on how they're using the power that they pay for of Georgia Power, and Georgia Power incentivizes them in behaviors that help Georgia Power serve the grid better. I think community solar provides some of these benefits at a local level, and it also has a mechanism to support ratepayers who are looking for ways to both support renewable energy and reduce their costs on their bills, which is important, I think, to anyone, whether you're in the territory. So to conclude, Georgia to date has, as you can see in the spotlight, about over 6 gigawatt of solar installed. That's quite a bit, and it's going up year after year. We definitely have shown that the grid can handle this diverse mix that we have in the state. And I believe we have shown that community solar could be a way to augment this and go above and beyond the DG levels and thresholds that Georgia Power has achieved so far. We can do more and we can save more for ratepayers, which I think is something that everyone is looking for. So I'd like to thank the committee for your time today, and I'm happy to answer any additional questions you may have.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Does anyone on the committee have a question? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. All right. Not lastly, we have Amir Yazdi. I can't pronounce. Oh, are you online with us?
Yes.
All right, I'm looking up to the sky because you're coming from a speaker somewhere. All right, wonderful. Thank you so much for being here today. And please, whenever you'd like to start, go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And I was going to say good morning, but I realized we're past noon. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Amir Yazdi, Deputy General Counsel at SEIA, Solar Energy Industries Association. SEIA is the driving force for the U.S. solar industry. We work with our 1,200 member companies to grow American jobs, champion customer choice, and promote responsible growth in our industry. Our members include just about everyone in the solar supply chain, including developers, communities such as community solar developers, manufacturers, financiers, and just about any business that touches on solar development. As you likely know, and probably have seen from also the fact sheet, solar remains one of the most popular energy sources for families and businesses in America. Solar consistently polls well, and our research shows that demand for solar is going to keep growing because we're saving families money and allowing customers to take control of their energy future. However, as the industry grows, one of our top priorities is the customer experience. This touches on customer education, industry training, and a smooth subscription process through interconnection and beyond. For today, I did want to just highlight just a couple of the things that SEIA is working on this front, specifically salesperson training and customer education. First, for salespeople. Salespeople are one of the first touch points in the customer's journey. Customers typically rely on salesperson to understand company products, the benefits, costs, and other features. And so ensuring that a knowledgeable sales force is out there helps make sure that customers receive accurate information about community solar benefits and costs and other requirements. And this is one big reason why the industry has taken on developing national standards on this front. SEIA is accredited by the American National Standards Institute as a national standards developer. This means we convene a balanced set of interests, including industry, government, and consumer interests, to develop these official national standards. And our standards also have to go through a rigorous public review and comment process. Right now, SEIA is working on ANSI national standards for salesperson training that covers topics such as community solar policy, bolstering savings claims, and what goes into contracts, among other things. And I'm also happy to share a copy of this draft standard with the committee after this meeting. The second piece is customer education. I think a huge part of customer engagement is making sure that customers know their options, how to navigate the offers, and how to vet providers in order to find not just the right product, but the right company for their needs. Having customers well informed is a key piece of a healthy and vibrant market. This is why SIA has launched various customer education campaigns, including our residential guide to community solar. This guide provides a high-level overview of community solar, key questions that customers should ask, and how to vet offers. And before I close, I did want to just underscore the importance of public-private collaboration. Collaboration ensures that both sides are able to share information, target and streamline efforts, and efficiently promote a great customer experience. We welcome partnerships with the government and look forward to working with you all on this important topic. Thank you for your attention.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Yazdi. Does anyone have a question for this particular presenter? All right. Wonderful. Thank you for being with us today. Thank you so much. All right. And we have some individuals, if they're still here. Is anyone with Georgia Tech still here? Oh, no, they left. I guess they got hungry. Georgia Tech had some students here, some engineering students that wanted to speak to us. I do not know what they wanted to say, so I'm not going to paraphrase or guess, but I do appreciate the fact that they took time to be at a committee meeting when they probably could have been somewhere a lot more fun than this. So if they're listening out there, thank you for your attendance today. I would like to thank everyone who presented here today. Thank you for your dedication and your commitment to being here and for sharing with us. And I'd like to thank our committee members, especially Chairman Parsons, for giving us this opportunity to deep dive in this subject, because it is an interesting and complicated subject. And I appreciate everyone taking the time to ask thoughtful questions to try to understand the process more fully. I'd like to thank also the Public Service Commission. We have Tom Kraus here with us today, and I appreciate him being present and listening, and look forward to working with the Public Service Commission and their capacity moving forward with this if we're able to come to some level of resolution on a potential bill. So thank you all for being here. And again, I guess I'll see you again in a couple of weeks at Biennial. Thank you.